Erika Galentin, clinical herbalist and co-creator at Sovereignty Herbs and the author of The Family Guide to Aromatherapy, a safe approach to using essential oils in a holistic home. And I'm really grateful that the Herbal Academy gave me the opportunity to sit down with you and talk a little bit about my new book, but also touch on some of the best practices as well as safety tips that I cover. One of the things that I think is really great about this publication is that each chapter is outlined by age group. And one of the first things that we learn about essential oils and safety and using aromatherapy in our home is that not all essential oils are safe for all age groups. And even if an essential oil is safe for all age groups, you're going to have to be using it at different doses or different dilutions. So each chapter in the book outlines by age group, starting at as early as 3 months old, all the way up into our senior years, really outlining, and each chapter has at the beginning very clear standards of how to use essential oils safely, including how to dilute them and which ones are considered safe. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on as kind of a general safety tip and a best practice is really kind of considering or avoiding which essential oils are considered hazardous or toxic. And that can mean a few different things. And I actually have a chart in the front of my book that kind of outlines 5 different reasons why you would want to avoid a particular essential oil. Some are actually considered very toxic, and toxic usually means that they've been shown in animal studies to cause things like cancer and tumors, and there's other kinds of toxic as well, such as essential oils that might cause pretty severe skin reactions, to a little bit more mild skin reactions like photosensitization. So that's when you use an essential oil on the skin, and then that skin is exposed to sunlight, and you get a really, really, really bad burn. And so it's just good practice to start to become familiar with which essential oils are considered hazardous, and those have been outlined really, really well in the introduction of my book. Let's see, what else? I wanted to talk about, one of the things that I've written down in my best practices is really kind of talking about this whole concept of a detox reaction. Sometimes when you're reading about essential oils or using essential oils at home, you might read a blog post by someone who talks about using a particular essential oil and having detox reactions. As a clinical herbalist, I am inclined to respond to this idea of detox reactions as a farce. And that's a sign that you're having a pretty significant adverse reaction, and that you really should listen to your body, but also listen to the bodies of your loved ones if you're using aromatherapy with them. One of the key practices to safety and essential oils is really paying attention to what happens. I've also given some instructions in the book about options you have for testing out the tolerability of an essential oil with a particular individual, including the option of doing a patch test, which is where you do a dilution of an essential oil in a carrier oil and you put a little on the skin to see if anything happens. So instructions about how to do that are in the book as well. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? So one of the things that is really going to be key, so we're talking about using essential oils at home, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, but we are actually talking about just the topical on the surface or aromatic being diffused in the air. We're not talking about internal use of essential oils, and I'm going to get to why in a second. But when we're using essential oils topically, one of the things that we want to do is we want to dilute them in a carrier or a base. And several years ago, I wrote a really extensive blog post for the Herbal Academy on different carrier oils and carrier substances that you can use to dilute essential oils to apply topically to the skin. So you should definitely check out that blog post. And dilution is going to change depending on the age of the individual, but also based on the character of an essential oil. For example, oregano essential oil, which everyone loves, is really quite hot and potent, especially when used topically. You could say the same for something like cinnamon essential oil, which again is very hot and very potent. And so when you're using essential oils and diluting them, you want to keep the character of that essential oil in mind as well with the dilution. And that's something that I also talk about in my book. Let us see. So the next thing that I kind of wanted to mention was, I did talk about just briefly, not using essential oils internally. And I will say that, you should avoid using essential oils internally if you are not working with a qualified healthcare practitioner. There are very many qualified healthcare practitioners out there that are very well trained in using essential oils internally. But what we're trying to avoid is things like using essential oils in your water as a flavoring agent, or even in your food as a flavoring agent. And one of the things that I discuss in my book very briefly is how a lot of individuals have justified the kind of willy-nilly internal use of essential oils based on the fact that those essential oils are on the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, Food and Drug Administration's list, generally recognized as safe. So this is the GRAS list. And really what that means is that those aren't necessarily safe for internal use, but they have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration as flavoring agents in the food industry. And so different food producers and producers of food flavorings are able to use those ingredients legally. That does not mean that you can just put that essential oil in your water and have a drink. Because when we expose our very sensitive membranes, like in our mouths or any of our other body cavities, essential oils can really burn and cause a lot of damage. So that's something that we totally want to avoid completely. And I did, one of the other blog posts that I wrote for the Herbal Academy had to do, if you are an herbalist and you are working with essential oils and you're interested in exploring the territory of using them as part of your herbal toolkit, there's a really wonderful blog post about different ways that we can do that. The different ways that I incorporate essential oils into my herbal practice that don't necessarily mean that you're going to need to use them internally. There's all kinds of options about how to use essential oils externally to support your clients. And so I would definitely have a checkout of that blog, and it gives you kind of the debate about the internal versus external use. And so that is really good. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, really briefly that I mentioned in my book is, and again, this is kind of just safety tips and best practices of, approaching essential oils, is really to note that the Food and Drug Administration does not regulate essential oils. In fact, essential oils are not even considered a legal term at the moment. There's a lot of gray areas surrounding, how they are dealt with, on the grand scheme of things. So they're not dietary supplement like herb extracts are, and they're not considered a food, and they're also not considered pharmaceuticals, and so they don't really fit into a category very easily. And so when we're looking at some of the marketing language that is involved in the purchase or the sale of essential oils, there's oftentimes words like 100% therapeutic grade. And these words are really only relevant to the manufacturers who are producing the essential oils. This isn't an external third-party qualification system. They don't have, essential oils don't have any kind of regulation in that way. And so we just want to make sure that when we're buying essential oils, we're very clear that they're not, they haven't been tested to the level of pharmaceuticals. They are not legally regulated. And so words like therapeutic grade don't actually have much meaning outside of marketing. So I think that's a really important point. And I do outline in my book, some of the considerations we need to think about when, we're purchasing essential oils. In fact, I've got a whole page about shopping for essential oils and what you should look for and how to avoid that decorative marketing language. Okay, and so, one of the last kind of practices, if you're getting into essential oils, you're thinking about using essential oils, even as an herbalist or just as a general consumer, is really considering sustainability. It's not responsible of us to be using any kind of plant extract or plant material from plants that are considered threatened or endangered species. And you would like to think that companies adhere to the Endangered Species Act, but unfortunately they don't always do. And so we really need to educate ourselves as consumers about the plants we're interested in using and all of their extracts, including essential oils, and whether or not they're endangered, whether they're threatened, and as well as think about their long-term sustainability. And I will say I did write quite an extensive blog post for the Herbal Academy on what sustainability really means and how we should define that as consumers of essential oils. So I really hope that you can have a look at that, because I think it's a really, really good starting point to get us to start thinking more critically about how we source the plants, substances, and extracts and oils that we use. And a really good example of this, I think I'm going to give you, there's some really obvious ones like sandalwood or rosewood, but there's also some not so obvious ones. For example, like eastern hemlock, that's Tsuga canadensis. This is a evergreen tree that's native to eastern North America, all up and down the coast. And, right now, due to habitat loss, as well as destruction by an invasive insect called the woolly adelgid, we are losing hemlock stands up and down the coast. And it's a really, really precious ecosystem. It's a rare and irreplaceable ecosystem. And so, I personally don't think it's very responsible for us to continue to purchase or use essential oil that has been made from these trees. It's just not good practice. So, when you're buying an essential oil for the first time, you should probably research the species, figure out what's going on with its ecology. Is it being wild harvested? Is it at risk? Are there any issues or concerns about sustainability? And do your homework so you know that you're not contributing, to the kind of not so great part of the international essential oil trade. And so, so check out that blog post. And then the last thing that I wanted to do was take a second to remind everybody that, aromatherapy and using essential oils is a journey. It's not a destination. You really, really need to do your research and ongoing research in order to be able to use these essential oils responsibly and safely. And so in closing, I just wanted to take a second to read a little bit, it's a paragraph from the introduction of my book that outlines my perspective very clearly about using essential oils. And so I want to read that to you. But before I do, I want to say that, this is available from most major booksellers. And there'll be a link associated with this video for you to be able to order a copy. And I really appreciate your support. And so I'm just going to take a second to read this paragraph from the introduction, which outlines my perspective and gives you a little bit more of a treat, I guess you will, about the content. So another key to safety is having realistic expectations. As a clinical herbalist, I'm always surprised when I read claims that herbs or essential oils can prevent, treat, or cure medical problems. Such claims are akin to using essential oils as if they were pharmaceuticals. Although essential oils have incredibly powerful actions, they have not been studied and tested with the same scientific rigor as pharmaceuticals, and are not nearly as legally regulated. Therefore, claiming that essential oils can prevent, treat, or cure anything is not only unsafe, it is both unlawful and beyond our current scope of understanding. Yes, there have been magnificent leaps and bounds in the use of essential oils to counter bacteria and other infection-causing organisms. And yes, there is an increasing body of research that verifies the use of essential oils in numerous healthcare scenarios. However, I am of the opinion that it is not only safer, but also more effective to shift our perspectives about the role of essential oils in our overall wellness strategies away from preventing, treating, or curing medical problems. Instead, we should aim to understand how essential oils may assist our minds and bodies as we confront these medical problems. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. And again, this is the Family Guide to Aromatherapy, a safe approach to essential oils for a holistic home. And I hope, I gotta go run and get the phone. That's probably a client calling. But I definitely hope you get to check out those blog posts that I mentioned as well.